So I think we have to not be afraid. We have to have courage to at least have the conversation. I think we've seen a shift in the culture around businesses and leaders. I can tell you that I felt that way even back in the day. It was like you were lucky to have a job.
That was Halston Mavrick, Director of Brand Partnerships at Indy Fuel Hockey, talking about how she and her team at Indy Fuel are working hard to expose and include a more diverse audience and fan base to the sport. And this is IBJ's The Freedom Forum with Angela B. Freeman. So, Halston, welcome to the Freedom Forum, and thank you so much for being here. This year continues to be a huge year for sports and major events in Indianapolis, and I've been speaking to some of the forces behind the major sports organizations in our city. But before we get started, will you please tell our listeners a bit about you, your educational and professional background, and any other factors that have led to you becoming the Director of Brand Partnerships at Indy Fuel Hockey?
Hi, Angela. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Like I said, my name is Halston Mavrick. I am an Indiana girl born and raised. I attended Pike High School on the northwest side of Indianapolis and went on to IUPUI. As I wrapped up my time with IUPUI, I was fortunate enough to begin a career with the Cheesecake Factory and shortly went into their management program there. Was lucky to have great mentors and an environment where they really fostered upward mobility and professional development, mentorship. So I was able to become a manager with them and stayed with them for almost 18 years. I made the transition into sports with Indy Fuel as the Director of Community Relations. So the past 5 years I've been with the team. 3 of the years I was there was community relations focused. The last couple of years have been partnerships and really getting our internship program off the ground, working on putting together a great team, and now turning my sights to brand partnerships out there in the community.
That's a fascinating history. And so before we dive into more details about Indy Fuel, I'd like to get to know a bit more about you and your career progression. So you mentioned that you had almost 2 decades at the Cheesecake Factory in various roles, but I understand most of that was as general manager. And people don't usually give the credibility they should to the transferable skills that are required to be successful in retail leadership, like managing big box restaurants and stores. I've had a husband who's basically spent the bulk of his career in retail management, leadership, people development. And so I appreciate the work ethic and leadership that requires. So when you think about the transferable skills, what transferable skills did you learn during your time in leadership at Cheesecake Factory that really equipped you or maybe prepared you for your current role at Indy Fuel? And what may be some of the biggest lessons you learned about dealing with people and business during your time at the Cheesecake Factory?
Well, you're absolutely right. There's no better way to get a lot of experience with people than being out there on the front lines, either in a restaurant, retail. You are going to be interacting with lots of different people in the public, different backgrounds, and your staff. The staff at Cheesecake Factory was very diverse. So I might be managing people who were college students. This is their first job. You really had to help them understand how to have a job and be responsible and check their schedule, all the way up through, people who might be 2 or 3 times my age, who had a very vast career path, and maybe they landed at Cheesecake Factory for various different reasons. So I do think it prepared me to just know how to connect with people in a quick way. I think they put a lot of emphasis on really getting to know your staff member. Everybody is motivated by different things, and getting to know them as a person beyond just the employee by knowing their personal interests, their families, what motivates them, what are their career aspirations. So I think that is something that definitely prepared me for a role in leadership, no matter what industry I'm working in. People are people. They want to work with people they like. They want to work with bosses that know and respect them. I think we're seeing a shift in that with younger generations, that they really want to connect with their bosses in a way that maybe was not something that was available or even talked about back in the 80s, 90s. People really want to be a part of a culture that feels really good to them. And so as a leader, I think you have to know that and make it a fun place to work. We spend more time away from our families sometimes than we do with our families. So Let's create a great environment where we're fostering collaboration. Everybody feels respected and liked, and that their goals are going to be supported by management.
So you mentioned briefly Cheesecake Factory had a management program. And I don't know that I've ever appreciated that. And you also have said that, it really prepared me for any industry. So can you tell us a little bit about that program and how it really set you up to be able to make a transition from the Cheesecake Factory to Indy Fuel?
So their program is great. I mean, even training on the staff level is very intensive. You really have a lot of feedback that you're getting all along the way. So the onboarding process is very important to Cheesecake Factory, even as a staff member. But for a manager, you have to go through every position, every staff position in the restaurant.
That's excellent.
Yeah. So you definitely know what their challenges are, what the struggles are, what's good about the position, where they might need more support. You're expected to jump in to help and get your hands dirty. There's no leading from the office, let's say. You can't,
Right.
Be leading a shift from your desk. You have to be out there with these staff members in the trenches and lending a hand. And that program not only prepared you for when you were getting out of training, but there was an ongoing program where you would be paired with a mentor manager. You would check in at least once a month. You would discuss your personal development plan. And as skills were obtained, they would come off of your plan and new skills were added on until you were able to get to the next level in your career. And again, something I didn't necessarily appreciate how intensive that was at the time, but that's pretty rare. You don't see that everywhere. And just having the expectation that you were going to constantly be developing yourself and that you were going to be constantly developing others, that you were never going to learn alone, that you were always going to hook someone by the arm and say, I just learned something new on the computer. I just found something out about a recipe. Come on, let me show it to you. That was an expectation that you were taking others along with you. And so that's definitely something that I've carried with my time at Indy Fuel is, I always say it's bad if one person knows how to do something. We need multiple people know how to do this skill or to handle this position. I think it also helps with collaboration if everybody knows a little bit about a lot. It helps row the boat in the same direction, so to speak.
That's really fascinating. I know, again, I mentioned my husband has really grown up in retail leadership, and I'm convinced that part of his success has been he truly grew and learned from the ground up. So when you mentioned that Cheesecake Factory had this management program where the managers had to do every job in the restaurant, that really does add credibility and viability for your relationship, for your management, for your advancement, because it is critical that the managers, the top levels, know what actually has to happen on the ground floor.
You're absolutely right. It would always be interesting to see someone who might get hired, because they promoted people within. That's how I was promoted. I was a staff member first, but they would also promote people who had vast restaurant experience and into the management program. And you're seeing this person who might have been the boss for the last couple of decades, and they're putting on a busser uniform. And they've got a polo shirt on and khaki shorts, and they've got an apron on, and it's like, get in there and bust that table. And you're just like, this is either a culture that you're good with or you're not. And that can kind of help weed out the people who might not be a culture fit, who don't want to participate in an environment like that. So, there'd be a time or two where someone wouldn't quite make it through the program because they maybe just weren't a fit. But yeah, you're right. It definitely created a mutual respect with managers and staff for the job everybody was doing.
And absolutely creates a team. You realize how important that busser is to the overall customer experience. So that sounds really fascinating. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think it is something that is probably lacking in many industries and many organizations. You don't often have the opportunity, unless that's just where you started and worked your way up, to really get a glimpse of what all the pieces are that make, these big puzzles of industries and organizations really, as you said, row the boat in the same direction. So I can appreciate how valuable that is. So transitioning a bit to the sports theme, as a woman in sports, what has been your experience in ascending to leadership? What have you found to be particular strengths that you bring to your teams? And are there any experiences that you're willing to share that exemplify some of the unique challenges or biases or microaggressions or barriers that women often experience along their career path to leadership, whether in Indiana or around the country, in private practice, corporate, government? I mean, there are many facets, but often it seems like the challenges are often the same. What's been your experience?
For me, I joined the sports industry when I already was a little bit seasoned in business. So I wasn't fresh out of college. I learned a lot of those. I was sure of myself, I guess. I had a confidence that I don't know that I had when I was 22 as a woman in her 30s, a woman of a certain age, Angela, we'll just say that. So I do think that life experience helps, right?
Sure,
Because
sure.
when you have those type of interactions, you kind of just tuck that in your back pocket, and whether you handled it well and you can pat yourself on the back, or whether you said, I'm really upset that I let someone take me out of my game. And the next time someone does that to me, this is how I'm going to handle it. So I think for me, it was easy to jump in because I knew my skills, I knew my worth and my value as a team member. I had no issues with our current team. I think our team is awesome. We actually had a women in sports night this past year, and we gave a panel to little girls who were in a nonprofit that focused on character building and mentorship with young girls. And the front office ladies were on that panel, and they were talking to us about what it's like to be, you're still a minority in sports if you're a woman. You know, there's still not as many women as there are men, but we are changing that. And we had to give kudos to the men in our office because I said, really, we work with a great group of men. We're not working with people who are constantly challenging us or belittling us. If anything, we're bossing them around a little bit and they take it. So, really the men of Indy Fuel, I have to tell you, are great. They are very supportive and they're very collaborative. And I do think they're an ally to women in sports. So that's helpful. It's helpful if you're already joining a team that respects women. And then I would say, if microaggressions or challenges is that, you're going to come across other people. Maybe it's a fan, maybe it's a vendor, maybe it's someone who's working alongside our staff, but maybe not in our staff, that might belittle you. They might not respect you because you're a woman. I think that you just have to, at that point, what does Michelle Obama say? When they go low, you go high. You
That's
just
right.
do not let them take you out of your game. And you are professional. Tell the people you need to tell if someone's making you uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form, and just stand your ground. I would say is good advice for women entering any type of business. And ultimately, if you find yourself in an environment where you have spoken up and it's not going anywhere, or you're not receiving the message back that you think would be appropriate, that might not be the team for you. It's like, it's not a you thing, it's a them thing. And you've just landed, unfortunately, in a spot that you're not meant to be in.
Yeah, we've talked about you can recruit people to a particular culture, but at some point they are going to be exposed to your culture, right? And if it is not welcoming to women or diverse people, they're not going to stick around. So it makes no difference all the promises you've said on the front end if the culture doesn't prove you to be truthful.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. Anybody can have a mission statement or, something on the wall that says, oh, this is who we are, but you have to actually back that up in practice every single day.
You mentioned having an event for the little girls. And I think that's so important because I talk a lot on this show about how I have become a scientist turned lawyer, but I've done that very late in my career, often and mostly because I just wasn't exposed to either one of those careers. I didn't know either one of those things existed. And so I do believe exposure is extremely important. You mentioned talking to the little girls just about being a woman in sports and really exposing them, whether they knew it or not, to the idea that this is a possibility, planting that seed. And so I'd like to ask you about what it takes. When you were small, what did you actually aspire to be? Did you know that sports or leadership or management was in your future? What did you, as a little young Halston, say you were going to be when you grew up? And when did you appreciate or realize that you really had opportunity to grow a career in leadership and management?
My mom will tell you that I was always meant to be a leader or a lawyer, she would say, because I could always get anybody to do what I wanted them to do.
Okay.
I could get the older kids to play the game I wanted to play. I was persuasive. I never gave up. I was chatty. I never met a stranger. So leadership and management was probably always in the cards for me. I never thought about sports or even restaurants. I wanted to be a singer. I wanted to be Whitney Houston. When I was little, I thought she was beautiful. I thought she had a great voice. So Madonna or Whitney Houston was who I aspired to be back in as a child of the 80s. But was that first talking about exposure and just realizing that something was even available to you? I got a job at Cheesecake Factory to be a hostess when the restaurant was first open. So I was part of the opening staff there. I had never even heard of the restaurant before. And as I quickly climbed through the ranks and got more exposure and was able to be a trainer and take on responsibilities, and because I had mentors who believed in me and said, this is a possible career path for you. That's the only reason that I became a manager. And having the experience of leading large teams and having guests, which are very similar to fans, that's the only reason I was able to make a transition into Indy Fuel. So I do think putting things in people's paths, letting them know that's even an option, and then doing the work yourself on trying to get some of those experiences and attaching yourself to mentors that you trust, so important.
And so you just speak to the importance that we talk about all the time, particularly for diverse audiences, women who, again, may not have the exposure, may not have access, that mentorships, people who have either been down your path, whether knowing or unknowing, and can expose you to opportunities. Hey, have you thought about doing this? Did you know that this was an opportunity? Do you think that you should apply for this promotion that maybe you were never even thinking you're qualified for? And your mentor's like, you're perfectly qualified. You should apply for that. Having mentors to expose you and guide you into your career are so, so important. And I'll say again, especially for women and diverse folks who may not be exposed or have the opportunity to have that kind of access. So I appreciate you mentioning that. Now it's time for a break.
Get caught up on the state's top business news every business day with the Inside Indiana Business Radio On Demand podcast. Available now at InsideIndianaBusiness.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
We're back with Halston Mavrick, Director of Brand Partnerships at Indy Fuel Hockey, on this 34th episode of the Freedom Forum with Angela B. Freeman. We'd also like to honor our diverse listeners during this Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders Heritage Month. Let's talk about and get more into the sports side of things, at least from my perspective, compared to many sports organizations who have become the fabric of central Indiana community, like the Indiana Pacers, the Indianapolis Colts, or even the Indianapolis Indians we were talking about as we walked up here. Hockey, as far as I know, is still relatively new to Indiana. And so can you provide us some historical context regarding the origin of Indy Fuel Hockey in Indiana and how it's come to have such a following and fandom here in the Hoosier State?
There's actually a lot of hockey history in Indiana that people don't really realize. Wayne Gretzky actually got his start here with the Indianapolis Racers. So we've had several teams here, the Indianapolis Ice, and as that team kind of fizzled out and there was a void here, that our owner, Jim Hallett, who's from Canada, who obviously grew up around hockey and is very into hockey, he thought, we need to get hockey back in Indianapolis. And 10 years ago, the Indy Fuel started. So we just wrapped up our 10th anniversary season. And I think what we've seen is that it is a fast-paced, exciting game. It's a physical game, and you don't have to know every single rule or know exactly what every penalty means to enjoy hockey. I certainly didn't know anything beyond hockey, beyond Mighty Ducks when I joined Indy Fuel. That was my exposure, was Miracle on Ice, USA winning the gold medal, and Mighty Ducks. And that's where it really ended. But it's exciting and it's fast-paced. And don't be intimidated about hockey. Come watch a game. You'll get hooked. It's very fun. I think we've seen people who are transplants from other states and other cities where maybe it's more popular get excited about having a professional team here. I think our team puts on a great show. We understand that we're an entertainment product. You might walk away excited about who won the game, but even if you don't even care about if we win or not, you're going to be excited about coming to do something with your family. It's approachable, it's affordable, and there's an entertainment value to our game presentation that is unmatched. So I think that's really the history of it, is that Jim Hallett wanted everyone to have access to this awesome sport, and we've slowly converted more and more hockey fans over the last decade, and no signs of slowing down. We've set record number of attendance this year, so we know people are excited.
That's excellent. And, we talk about diversity. Of course, this program is about diversity, but that is a great example of diversity in the sports organizations, in the sports industries, like Jim Hallett having the foresight to say, there are people in Indiana who want to be hockey fans too. So how can we provide them access to something that they may not have had access to before? So I really appreciate that. So let's talk about hockey as a sport. Again, I will admit I don't know a lot about hockey. I'm about with where you started at the Mighty Ducks and but I would assert and do believe that professional hockey is probably not nearly as diverse of a sport as some other professional sports like basketball or baseball. And there aren't nearly as many diverse people involved and represented at all levels, including the players, the owners, administrators, and even their fans. And similarly, I've spoken with my friend and mentor, Jimmy McMillan at IMS, who has designed programs specifically to try to introduce and engage more diverse fans to motorsports, because he also recognized historically motorsports just haven't been necessarily targeted or tailored to a wide or diverse audience. So tell us your thoughts about why hockey seems to be generally less diverse with regard to the players, owners, and fans, etc. And then more importantly, what are you and others at Indy Fuel doing to ensure that hockey is introduced and is inclusive of more diverse audience, particularly here in Indiana?
I think with hockey, there's a few things. The sport started in Scandinavia. So it's popular in Canada, Russia, some European countries that just don't have a very diverse population. So it's starting from that. There's some economic barriers to hockey that you have to acknowledge. Anybody has a pair of shoes and a basketball hanging around, in the neighborhood, but not everybody has skates and a stick and ice time. Actually, access to a rink and ice time is very expensive. So that is a barrier for a lot of families. And I think that's, you tend to maybe watch what your dad or your mom watched, right? It's like, I think we all have those, whether it's sports or whether it's a musician or an activity where you're like, I remember doing this with my dad. I'm a Reds fan because my dad was a Reds fan, or I, like Chicago Blackhawks because my grandpa liked the Chicago Blackhawks. So if you don't come from a family who watched hockey or played hockey, how do you get in? What's the entry point, right? And so I think for a lot of people of color or women or whatever minority group you're talking about, we have to slowly put that in their path. We have to say, hey, we're here and we're embracing you. And a couple of ways that we've done that, I think our team several years ago really started leaning in on our Hockey is for Everyone initiative.
I saw that slogan, and that's nice.
An NHL initiative that was started by someone who was very close to the NHL world and was outwardly gay man. And he really wanted to eradicate homophobia in the sport and started this Hockey's for Everyone. So it's not just LGBTQ, it's people of color, it's women, it's disabilities, it's everyone. It's literally everyone. So we really leaned hard into that starting, I would say, about 4 years ago and really made that night more of a focus. We have invited lots of groups, LGBTQ. We've put a focus on women and girls in hockey. We work with a couple different local teams, the sled hockey team, the Indy Steel. They do amazing things. It's hard for our players even to do it. This is how physical this is, where they're actually playing on sleds. There's such thing as blind hockey, if you believe it or not. There's actually blind hockey organizations. The Twisters is a group, it's a youth hockey team locally that is filled with children who have autism or Down syndrome, and they're out there playing hockey. So we've really leaned into our relationships with those organizations. We've tried to make our games as accessible as possible to as many people as possible, providing sensory kits. We've done a lot of work with the city of Fishers with our new event center that will be opening up this fall into making the benches able to accommodate sled hockey, rooms for nursing mothers, sensory rooms, things like that, because we really want everyone who walks in to immediately feel comfortable and that they're welcomed in. So change is slow. It's, we wish you could just snap your fingers and you have this very diverse fan base because it does skew white and maybe skews a little bit male, but I can see we're slowly getting more people to try us out and to come in and to realize what a great sport it is. And, there's been some great strides, not just with our team, but other teams as well. Cincinnati Cyclones is in our league. They're in our division, and they have a black head coach. For the first time, they had a black starting line this year. One of their nights, they had a whole starting line of black players, which was amazing. Like, what a cool thing. You would not have seen that in years past. The PWHL is setting records with women's hockey attendance. So there is a need and a want for people to participate if they are welcomed and it's accessible to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exciting to know. I appreciate you highlighting what Cincinnati's doing because that clearly is an evolution in the diversity of the game and the sport and access to it. You mentioned briefly the new Fisher Center, and I don't want to blow past that because I know there's some exciting news you have in that regard. So please tell us about the upcoming future plans for Indy Fuel with regard to the Fisher Center and the new football team, Fisher Freight, right?
Yes, we have a lot of fun things on the horizon. So we've wrapped up a decade of hockey in the fairgrounds at the Indiana Farmers Coliseum. It's been great, but we are moving to Fishers. There's a brand new Fishers Event Center that the city of Fishers is building for us to be the anchor tenant. And so starting this fall, that will be our new home, and it will be amazing. I've gotten to tour it several times. You can look at different things that they've posted online. If you go to the Fishers Event Center Facebook page, for example, there's all kinds of time-lapse videos and pictures and renderings and things like that. But it's going to be an amazing event center out in the suburbs for citizens of Indianapolis and the surrounding area to attend not only Indy Fuel games and Fisher's Freight games, but concerts and all kinds of family shows. It will be truly an entertainment district over there, and we are excited to be a part of it. You mentioned the Fisher's Freight, so our Jim Hallett, our owner, has added a football team, part of the Indoor Football League, to our ownership portfolio, and it will be the Fisher's Freight. So we will have another professional football team in Indianapolis, Fishers area, for families, and that will start in March of 25. So that season will go March through July. So just another sporting option for fans.
And will they also play at the Fishers Event Center?
They will.
Yeah.
That'll be their home too.
That's really exciting. I'm excited about all that. I've probably been to 2 hockey games in my tenure, and they were at the fairgrounds. So it will be exciting for the new venue. Excited for that. Excited for your team and for Indy Fuel. So let's go back a bit to managing your role in the organization. And I want to ask you, and you had already kind of hinted to this because you said you have a lot of male allies at Indy Fuel who are really supportive and, really help you do what you need to do there. But I want to ask you that question directly with regard to how armed and supported do you feel with your organization's management in your current role to increase diverse representation, leadership, and engagement within your organization and your fan base? And, based off the Cincinnati example, what advice would you offer other sports organizations who are also looking to increase the diversity in their fan base, which of course increases their revenue base, by making their sport, their fandom, the following of their sports organization more diverse, and having more different types of folks being engaged with their sport and their team while here in Indiana?
Yeah, we're definitely supported by the leadership of our team. I think with a minor league team especially, there's a small team that does a lot. So it's a lot of collaboration. We're right now in the very beginning stages of planning all of our promotional nights and our theme nights for next year. This is how early this starts. Our season just ended and we're right back at it. So there's really not really an off season. But we look at what do we want to do? What initiatives do we want to continue with? Which ones would we maybe want to add? And we're the ones that come up with the plan. And if it makes sense and it's something that will reach out to more fans and will increase the exposure our fan base maybe has to diverse groups, our leadership's all for it. They know that we're constantly trying to reach more fans, more people. So we're supported. If we want to do something, we can do it. We have several women on the team. And again, not in addition to Hockey's for Everyone, we added a disability awareness night this past year in partnership with the city of Fishers. And we really went all in on that Women's Month celebration. We did the panel for the first time. We did a few other things in game that we had never done before. And it was like, yeah, sure, go for it. Come up with great ideas. I think it through, have a great plan. And to your point, if you have someone who might be a little hesitant to change things or mix things up, playing the business angle and how this is going to help revenue and ultimately increase business consideration, I think is a good route to take if you have a manager or someone that you have to kind of sell this idea to if you want to get a little bit more diverse. But I think there's a lot of things teams and other businesses can do. I know a lot of the larger teams or larger businesses in general have added some sort of committee, diversity equity inclusion committee just to bounce things off of and to help plan events and making sure that those folks are being considered when they are rolling out initiatives or different things. And I think that's awesome. If you don't have a large company or something that doesn't feel doable for you, I think start small. I think perfect sometimes is the enemy of getting something done. And no one's an expert on this unless you really are an expert on it, but most of us are not. And don't be afraid to just start the conversation and to maybe look at your teammates and say, is this something we want to take on? And if it is, which part do we want to take on? Is it something with women? Is it something with people of color? Even if it's not something that maybe is your own team, if you have an industry and you decide you want to lean into Black History Month, well, have there been any Black milestone, makers in your field? Has there been someone in the past that has done an amazing job, that's been a pioneer in your field that you could kind of recognize and talk about and just highlight during that time? Is there women or something that you could do to outreach to a women's organization or girls organization during March, International Women's Month? So I think start small and you'd be surprised where it goes.
I think that's really promising because, again, I think a lot of folks don't have the exposure and the access, as we mentioned. And to know, I've looked at your LinkedIn page, your Facebook or Instagram, and you all seem to be very tied into the community. It seems like you do a lot of things in the community, going to schools, going to different venues to continue building that fan base, that young and diverse fan base, getting exposure out there. And quite frankly, I think that's what's necessary, particularly when you have a sport or organization that may not be as top of mind as some of the others in the city. Everybody knows the Colts and the Pacers and now the Fever for sure, right?
Sure.
But I think hockey is still in a space and place where they're vying for not just the fan base, but the education of the sport. Again, you just educated me that hockey's actually been here for a decade plus, which I didn't even appreciate. So I do appreciate all the things that you are doing in the community to expose more of the community and more broader swaths of the community to this sport and access to it and all that it brings. And so going back again to your leadership in the organization, I just want to spend some time and talk about some of the things that you and your team have accomplished while you've been there, some of the things you may want to tout that you're particularly proud of. And then as you look to the horizon for Indy Fuel and going into this new venue in Fishers, what are some of the things that you would want the broader Central Indiana or Indianapolis community to know about what's going on in the future, where they can fit in, where they can support, and how we can all chime in and chip in to make Indy Fuel a greater success as we go forward?
Well, there's a lot of things I'm proud of with our team. I'm proud of our collaboration across the board. I am proud that we have dug into some of these initiatives and really seen them grow. I think something early on we agreed on was that we didn't want to do any of that virtue signaling. We didn't want to change our logo rainbow in June and call it good. We wanted to do things year round that really backed up what we were saying. And I think we've done that. We've supported local organizations through donations or our time, volunteering. To your point, we're getting out there in the community, sending our mascot. So I think we have done the work to back up those initiatives all year round, which I do feel great about. There's always more you can do, but we have done that. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of our attendance this year. Again, we set a record. We sold out over a third of our games, record number of attendance. And that just shows you that we're giving fans a great time. I'm a mom. I have 2 kids. Everyone that has limited resources and time and energy, you have to pick where you are going to spend your dollars and your time, and you want to feel good about it. You want to feel good about the choices that you're making and where you're bringing your family. And I know that there's no way a family is coming to an Indy Fuel game and is leaving without having a good time. They are there. We have the great game presentation. We've got a dynamic game. We've got great staff ready to take care of you while you're there. It's entertaining. So I am proud of the product that we are putting in front of our community that we're inviting into our 4 walls. So very proud about that. What we are excited about and what I'd want people to know is that we're not stopping. We are continuing to surpass our own accomplishments every single year. And we're looking forward to giving people a great experience at the Fishers Event Center coming this fall. You can expect the same affordability and accessibility that you have seen from us this past decade and only will increase moving forward. We've got the football team that we're very excited to roll out. And we are continuing to build meaningful and lasting partnerships with not only the corporate community, but the nonprofit partners. And we look forward to that.
That sounds so exciting. And I'm so excited for you and our community and all that that's going to provide to us as one more sports venue, sports opportunity in the city, which has already grown and become known for a really strong sports presence. In the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we often talk about the idea that people want a culture that allows them to be authentic. And of course, there's no absolute definition of what that means, but we have seen more and more people wanting to be in an environment where they can bring their whole self, whether that's their background, their food, their religious beliefs, their whatever the case may be, and have people in their workplace may not necessarily understand it all, but respect it all, right? So what's that mean for you in Indy Fuel, authenticity?
Really what we talked about earlier, getting to know the individual and understanding what's important to them, right? So if you have a staff member, an intern, let's say, who is Muslim and they are in Ramadan and they might need a break at a time that you don't normally see a break, and they need to eat something after sunset. And I don't need to be in their religion to understand that they have a need. And can I accommodate that need? Absolutely, I can. Someone who has a disability or somebody that has certain neuro differences or something like that, it's meeting people where they are. And I think an important phrase is, thank you for sharing that with me. I'm so glad you felt comfortable enough to come to me with that. Tell me what you need. I will accommodate it. And if you're finding that I'm falling short in any way and I'm forgetting about this accommodation, please let me know. Just making sure people understand that they are truly respected and cared for as a person. I think time in the saddle in business, possibly becoming a parent, just as you rack up more life experiences and you just realize that people are all just doing the best they can.
That's right.
And they're coming from a lot of different backgrounds and challenges. And if you can be a bright spot in their day, and you can be a leader that really shows that you respect and care for them as a person besides the work, they are just so much more likely to stick around, to be engaged in their job, and to respect you as a leader.
I really love that you said, thanks for sharing that, because I don't think we often take enough time to appreciate how much vulnerability and trust it takes for people who are different in whatever way it is, things that we can see and not see, to share with a supervisor, a peer, a friend, a colleague that, hey, I have this challenge or this issue that I'm working through, and just acknowledging, hey, I appreciate that you even see me as someone you can share that with.
Right.
I appreciate that. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that. And it's a real thing. Just that in and of itself will start the bond of trust and respect and people being their true, authentic selves.
A lot of times when you share something like that, it can be weaponized if it's shared with the wrong person.
Absolutely.
And so when they make that sign of trust, make sure that they don't regret it.
So as we begin to wrap up, I want to ask you, you mentioned that you are a native Hoosier, that you grown up here. And so you are as good a person as anyone to kind of give a historical perspective on how Indiana businesses and corporations as a collective have really began to shift and become more diverse and inclusive in their workspaces and their workplaces in a way that continues to reflect the diversity that's here in the Hoosier State, the diversity of talent and expertise that we have here in all respects, not just sports, but life sciences and industry and tech and so many places that we are really strong. So what would you see? What are 2 or 3 tips or tools or resources that you would suggest to any Indiana corporate leader who's serious about continuing that progress to make Indiana and our organizations, our sports organizations, more diverse, more inclusive, so that Indiana continues to be a place where people across the nation and even internationally can come and thrive and feel like they can fit in and have a successful career and life?
What I said earlier about starting small, I think sometimes we dance around this diversity topic because we don't want to offend. We don't know what to say. We don't feel like we're an expert. You know, when you reached out to me to come on the podcast, I said, okay, just to be clear, I'm not a DEI expert. And you're like, that's okay. I'm just like, I just want to make sure I'm not misrepresenting myself. So I think we have to not be afraid. We have to have courage to at least have the conversation. I think we've seen a shift in the culture around businesses and leaders. I can tell you that I felt that way even back in the day. It was like you were lucky to have a job. You know, you were lucky to be here. Where now I think it's shifted where as leaders, you have to be a servant leader. You have to be serving the people you're leading. You have to make sure that you are really worthy of these people following you.
Sure.
And we've seen people have options, love them or lose them. If you are not a good leader and you're not treating people well, they'll be out of here. Long gone are the days where someone gets a job and they work it for 30 years and then they get the watch at the retirement ceremony and they retire. That's not how it is. People are staying at jobs less time and they have options. There's remote work. There's all kinds of things. So we have to be flexible with people and we have to be a servant leader. I think, you know, including them in the conversation. If it's something that is important to a leader to say, diversity is important to me, I'd like to increase that. Start with your own team. Start with the honest conversation with your own team about how do you all feel about this? Where do you think we're falling short? What do you think we could do better in this space? Reaching out to organizations that match what you're interested in, letting them know that you're here and that you want to have the conversation. I think I read something recently that said a good ally, so much of the work doesn't happen with the diverse group. It actually happens with your own group. So if I'm wanting to be better about diversity in business, some of that's going to happen with my peers and people who are white and talking about how we're continuing to be allies and what have you learned and what resources, you know, have you tapped into? So being able to share those resources with people who are in your own group.
Halston, I thank you so much for coming by here today. This has been fascinating. It's been very insightful and very educational and informative on what all we can expect in this very exciting season that's going to be coming for Indy Fuel and Fisher's Freight in the new Fisher Center. So thank you so much for being on this 34th episode of the Freedom Forum.
Thanks, Angela. The pleasure was mine.
Thank you again to Halston Mavrick. And thanks to you for joining us on this 34th episode of IBJ's The Freedom Forum with Angela B. Freeman. Please come back next month for another conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Central Indiana business community.